You are listening to Lovesick, the podcast, where we dive into health, wellness, and relationships and their impact on the world. Come be a part of the discussion and join our community by following us on YouTube, Instagram, and listening wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back, everyone, to our official Lovesick podcast. I'm your host, Dorothea, and to my left
Is Jada.
and my right,
Michael.
And today we have a very exciting subject matter. We have Tina Shin, and she's from OC Lymphatics. Welcome, Tina. This is going to be a great show.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. So
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm really excited to talk about the lymphatic system.
Yes.
And everything related to the lymphatic system.
Yeah, so guess what? Let's get started then.
Okay.
Can you tell us what is the main role of the lymphatic system?
Yes. The lymphatic system, I think, is one of those systems that is so underappreciated, but I think one of the most important body systems that we have. I mean, I might be a little biased, but it said that if our lymphatic system were to fail, we would die within 24 to 48 hours.
Wow.
So it does a lot. It's essentially our immune system. It regulates fluids in our body. So it has a huge role. And when I kind of think about the main roles, I like to organize it as three main things in my mind. So what I tell my patients a lot of times is, number one, it's kind of like our plumbing sewage system, okay? Number two, it's kind of like our own little FedEx UPS system. I'll elaborate.
Okay. That's
The delivery, okay, I like it.
And then number three, it's kind of like our own little personal TSA system, okay? Like TSA, like at the airport, okay?
Right.
So number one, our plumbing sewage system. Our lymphatic system takes all the junk and the muck and the stuff that we don't want floating around in our bodies. It kind of collects it, cleans it, and filters and dumps it out through an elaborate system of kind of pipes that run through our body. Our circulatory system, our arteries, our veins, they're very leaky, so they can leak out a lot of things, like proteins, blood, just a lot of fluids. And it reabsorbs a lot of it, but anything that it doesn't reabsorb, the lymphatic system kind of comes in and then reabsorbs and picks up the leftovers. So by doing that, it kind of regulates our fluids, right? If we think of it like our plumbing system, we don't want anything to get backed up and overflow, right? So our lymphatic system is kind of regulating that, okay? So that's number one.
Okay.
Number two, when I say it's kind of like FedEx, UPS, in addition to cleaning, it also kind of delivers things that we do want distributed throughout our body. And it kind of packages them up nicely and then delivers them. So, things like fat-soluble nutrients and, lipids that maybe we want to store and hold for energy later, as opposed to our body just kind of metabolizing it, right? So it kind of takes these nice things, packages them, and delivers them, okay? And then number three, the TSA system.
What a great analogy.
I love these analogies.
I like analogies.
That's
My
how we refer to it for
it's how my
forever
brain
now.
understands things. But our TSA system, it's kind of like, okay, you go to the airport, you got to go through security. But our lymphatic system is like TSA on steroids, where it's going through multiple checkpoints. So as the fluid travels throughout our body, it's cleaning, it's delivering, it's doing its thing. It's also going through checkpoints, i.e. our lymph nodes. And so as it goes through, the lymph nodes are kind of seeing, okay, is there anything here that we really need to attack and kind of nip in the bud?
Wow.
If there is, then we need to send for backup, send for reinforcements, send things like white blood cells to help kind of kill this thing. And then by doing that, usually it'll set off an immune response. So a lot of times, the immune response is what we get when these things happen. So that's kind of the main role of the lymphatic system.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
That's a lot of parts.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
important.
real.
No, and it's huge. It's like
important.
it's massive throughout your whole body.
Yeah. Right.
And what's interesting is we never talk about it. It's something that's rarely do people ever check unless you know you have a problem.
Right.
Very few people even really know where their lymph nodes are,
True.
even though
Right.
they're
Yep.
all over the body.
Yes,
Right.
that's
Pe-
true.
People usually know of like one or two
Mhm.
sets,
Right.
unless they've had a problem.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And the TSA example I think is awesome because it is like a checklist, right? Like, okay, it checks for this in this area, and then it checks for the next thing, and if it gets to that, to the next step, and then it has a response. And the
Right.
body's just this massively beautiful, complex kind of it's like a warehouse, and at the same time, it's like
Mhm.
this beautiful chemistry set
Yeah.
that's always balancing itself. And we don't realize how different each of our chemistry sets are, even though there is a baseline, and then how much is the same and how delicate that change can be in certain areas.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's also like I'm curious to find out what are the roadblocks for your system, right? So it's
Right.
like I know we spoke off camera about sugar a little bit, but it's like what are the roadblocks that will cause mine to
Flare up.
flare up or
Right, yeah.
mechanical issues or
Right.
something,
Right.
know,
And
like
what happens?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'll get into that. I
Okay.
think to help kind of understand a little better, I think it's always helpful to kind of understand the basics of how the lymphatic system actually
Yes.
works.
Okay.
So another analogy.
Bring
Bring
them
them
coming.
I
Bring them
love
coming.
it.
We love
people to
them.
remember.
I love them so much.
Everything's so scientific. Sometimes it's like hard to,
Yeah, but
grasp.
somewhere there's going to be
Bring
somebody
it.
in medical school going, I get it now,
Yeah,
right?
hopefully. But so, when I think about how the lymphatic system works, I like to picture like a plant or a flower, right? So
Okay.
think of the whole plant with the roots and all, right? So we have the stem and we have all the roots that come out from below the stem. And those roots kind of branch out into thinner, smaller roots until eventually they're pretty thin. They're
Mhm.
pretty, fine. And that's like our lymphatic system.
Okay.
And those fine, thin branches are right underneath the surface of our skin. So we call them the superficial lymphatics. And they collect all the things that I talked about from the tissues. They drain them into deeper, deeper branches that kind of, start to converge.
Mhm.
All those branches or roots converge at a specific point, a little sac. In most people, it's like right above your belly button, and it's called the cisterna chyli. And from there, it moves into a bigger lymphatic vessel. It's the biggest one in our body, called the thoracic duct. And it basically runs all up and down our trunk. And it brings all that lymphatic fluid up through our trunk from our lower body, up through our trunk, and it meets at a very specific point in the left part of your neck.
Wow.
And here is where it dumps all that fluid back into your venous system. So into your veins where it's circulated, and then it kind of, you either like pee it out, poop it out, your body
Right,
gets rid of
right.
it.
Wow.
And then, so that's about 3/4 of our body that's doing that. Our lower legs, our lower part of our body, our left arm, left upper quadrant of our body, it all comes here. So this is a very important part of the lymphatic system.
Hmm.
The remaining 1/4, so basically your right arm, right upper quadrant of your body, dumps into a similar point on the right side of your neck. So don't ask me why it's like 3/4 and 1/4.
Right.
I don't know. I didn't design it.
No analogy for that?
People say it's because the heart's on this side. I don't know, but that's
Outside, inside.
yeah. So they kind of dump all here at this point in your neck, and it gathers all that fluid, dumps it all in, and then kind of does its thing. So, the issues though arise and these symptoms come up when your lymphatic system doesn't quite do that like it should,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So now we get a backup somewhere, or the system isn't flowing like it should. The pipes aren't working like they should.
Mhm.
It's moving slower than it should. Um, and yeah, that's when we run into some of the issues that we might see or that people might feel.
It's something that you just said that because I remember when I got my diagnosis years ago that they actually did it through my neck, and
Oh,
it's something that you said lymphatics, and it dumps in your neck.
right.
That's where I actually got my biopsy on the left
Okay.
side of my neck,
Uh-huh.
and that's how I was diagnosed.
Oh,
That's
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was definitely interesting that you said that,
Yeah.
because I'm thinking back like, wow, that's where I had my, where the pathologist, they did the not the diagnosis at that moment, but they actually went in my neck,
Yeah.
got some of the, I guess, tissue, fluid or whatever, and that's how
Yeah.
I got diagnosed.
Right.
If there's something visibly like backed up in those
Oh,
areas, is
swollen.
that when it gets like swollen?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
maybe.
Okay. Okay.
It's not always, right? It's
So it
not
doesn't have to
universal, and
be.
usually that's a major backup, right?
Right. It
Yeah.
could
Ooh,
be. Yeah. So
okay.
when I think about some of these things that people might experience, I kind of think of it as like a spectrum of things that could happen. On the kind of the front end, we
Mhm.
have things just like sluggishness. We might feel lethargic. We
Mhm.
might have some of that brain fog or just kind of feel like icky, right? And then we might move into like actual inflammation. Okay, now we have areas that are they're hot, they're inflamed, they're warm, they're tender. We have pain,
Mhm.
and it could be localized or it could be just kind of a generalized thing, right? And then we might move into, okay, now we have actual edema or swelling. And, now we're noticing, okay, it's visible, it's palpable. I can see it and I can feel it. Um, and then, on the far end of the spectrum, we have chronic conditions like lymphedema, which we were kind of talking about before the show.
Right,
But,
right.
this is where there's a problem somewhere in your lymphatic system. And the part that it is responsible for draining, so let's say most commonly it's, let's say, breast cancer.
Mm.
Somebody gets breast cancer, they have surgery, they have lymph nodes removed,
Mhm.
usually from the axilla,
Mhm.
or they have radiation and the lymph nodes are damaged. Well, this area is responsible for draining my arm. So now my
Oh.
arm might start to get really swollen. And then when you move into the actual condition of lymphedema, now it's a chronic and usually progressive disease.
Wow.
Usually people aren't going to get spontaneous lymphedema.
Mhm.
That's, there's a cause for that.
Right.
But yeah, so there's this whole spectrum of things that can happen, and it it could take a while, like if you have a little clog in one of your drainage pipes,
That's so
it can still flow, things can
right.
still get through, right? It'll still drain,
Mhm.
but over time as more muck builds up, it's going to start to get slower and
Right.
slower.
Until it
Um,
stops, I guess. Yeah.
exactly. Your body's going to
Right.
compensate for as long as it can
Mm.
until one day it can't, right? And then
Wow.
you might start to notice some of these symptoms.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of times what people see is the backup somewhere else up the chain
Right.
first, as opposed to the actual exact spot where the problem is, right?
Right.
Because the slowdown is happening and everything starts backing up, and then the one behind it is the one that's where you feel the pain, or that's where you see the most initial swelling, or have
Right.
that hot spot.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah. So you might not go when you're doing the treatment, you might not go straight to the part that's,
Right.
visible.
Mhm.
If I have swelling in my arm, and
Oh,
another
wow.
analogy.
Just bring them all.
Hey, you know what? If it helps people understand,
it's
I think
working.
it's
Keep
amazing.
going.
Yeah.
This is one we use a lot. A lot of people
Right.
in the lymphatic world use this, but it's kind of like traffic on the freeway.
Okay.
So we have, a backup here. It's all swollen in my hand, in my arm. Well, I can't just start pushing this fluid because I need to get to the root of what's the problem. I need to get
Right.
to where the accident is on the freeway, clear that so that this stuff has somewhere to go first. So, when you get lymphatic work, people might think, why are you starting at my neck? It's my
Right.
foot
Right.
that's swollen.
Yeah.
Well, that goes back to having an understanding of how the lymphatic system works,
Wow.
where we want to start at the very
The root
core
of it, pretty
drainage
much.
point, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Clear all the stuff so that your system has somewhere to flow, and then we can start to clear out whatever it is that we're working on.
Can you
Wow.
talk about the how the manual lymphatic drainage, how that actually works, the system?
Yeah, yeah. So, when people seek out lymphatic work, it is getting more popular now.
Mhm.
People
This
are
is why they come to you, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
People are starting to learn more about it, which is
Right.
good and bad. You know, there's some people are coming for the wrong reasons. Some people
Okay.
have
Oh.
misunderstandings about what it is that we do.
Well, let's
Um,
get that out in the open of what it should really
What the
be.
right reason
Yeah,
is, yeah.
So manual lymphatic drainage started as a medical modality, right?
Mhm.
So we, in the hospital setting, we treat people who have actual conditions like lymphedema, who have swelling, and we use manual lymphatic drainage where it's essentially the therapist using their hands to manually move that fluid along the natural pathways that your body would do it anyway,
Okay.
pushing it towards the lymph nodes so they can do their thing, pushing it along the ways that it would travel anyway. We're just kind of helping to speed along the process and, do it more efficiently.
Mhm.
So again, going back to when we think about the anatomy of the
Mhm.
lymphatic system, we're targeting the superficial lymphatics. We're targeting those lymphatics that are right underneath the surface of the skin. So when the therapist is working on you, it's not a deep tissue type of thing.
So it's not like the
very fine.
massage, like
It
is it?
feels like a massage, but it's
But
not
it's
muscular. So,
okay.
it's very gentle. It's
Mhm.
very rhythmic. Again, it's just kind of mimicking what your body would do anyway.
Mm.
So the main thing when you are getting the lymphatic drainage, you want to make sure that the therapist first knows the anatomy and physiology
Right.
because it's a certain direction that you want to push the fluid. You want to know that they're not doing it too deeply because all you're doing then essentially is you're kind of smushing those vessels
Mhm.
and compressing them, which doesn't allow the fluid to flow, which is counterproductive to what we're trying to do, right? Um, so, when you look at the vessels that we're targeting when we're doing the lymphatic work, they're very small. They're like one cell thick, and they have these little flaps that are kind of like blinders. And so when you stretch the skin, you're just kind of promoting the opening and closing of the flaps so that fluid, proteins, whatever you're trying to get the lymphatic system to absorb
Right.
can come in. There's also valves, just like in the veins. So the lymphatic fluid, it only moves in a certain direction at the superficial level. So, the valves prevent backflow. So as you move the fluid from one segment to the next, the flaps open and close so that it doesn't flow in the wrong direction.
Mm.
So you want to make sure again that the
Right.
therapist isn't pushing against those valves in the wrong
Right.
direction.
It's like pushing against the wrong door. It's like it's
Right,
it's
yeah.
like if you pull the push, right?
Wow.
Good
And
luck.
and if
Yeah.
you keep pushing it, it's just going to stack it up and create
Yeah.
a new
Right.
problem.
Exactly.
And I think
Yeah.
people like to use another analogy, like it's like doors in your house, right?
Right.
Mhm.
You only want things to come in certain doors in your house, right? You would
Exactly.
only like you got a mess in your house, you only want people to see certain rooms.
Just the
You
living
close
room,
certain
yeah.
ones, right? Like so your body starts closing them as they go.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
a gentle thing to like reopen and
Right.
help push things towards the gate so they can work the way they're supposed to.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
you can work things backwards if you're not knowing what you're doing.
Right.
And I think maybe for people, not to interrupt, but like
Mhm.
for people who maybe really haven't studied their skin, their body, their, you know, for lack of a better analogy, I mean, if you've ever eaten lasagna, right? There's all those layers, right?
Right.
That is what your epidermis is kind of like, which is
Yeah.
like the
That's
layers of
true.
skin.
That's true, though.
And you have this layer called fascia that we never talk about that runs over your
Yes.
whole body, but it runs between the layers and between the muscles, and they're at different levels. And the lymphatic system works at all of those.
Right.
But place where we start having a real problem is think about like you have cheese on top as if that was your skin, right? In that pasta sauce just below that is the tiny little spaces in between,
Yes.
but it's only going to flow one direction.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be like if I stood on one side and squished all of the stuff in one direction, then it all goes on one side of the tray.
Mhm.
Well, only people are going to eat that side, right? Like that's it. But everything's got to go back the other way. So if you can think about it in that way, and everybody's body is a little different. What your fat makeup is,
Mm-hmm.
maybe is how many layers of cheese
Yeah.
you added,
Right.
how many, where,
How many
where-
levels of cheese you actually ate that day, too?
where the meat is in there, like how much, and like but if you think of it in that way as a visual, or even bricks. I mean, we have bricks here on the wall behind, Jada and Dorothea. Like it's all those different layers. But if you start pushing things in the wrong direction or pushing too deep, you start squishing the things from the top into the bottom, and now you create a whole different problem, right?
Right. Right. Yep.
And it depends on, Tina, the actual illness too, right? Of what the person
Yes.
actually comes in for.
Yeah, and
you know,
I
the flow.
will add that, for the most part, the basics of the theories behind the lymphatic drainage is that it should be gentle. But
Mm.
there are times, like Michael said, we might feel there's fascial restrictions, and we got to break through that first.
Okay.
So I don't want to say, if you get this done and it's nothing but gentle, it's wrong.
Right.
Okay.
There are times too, depending on what we're targeting, we
Mhm.
might go for the deeper lymphatics, and especially
Wow.
around the belly area, we will do some deeper techniques.
Okay.
But again, it comes down to kind of knowing why you're doing what you're doing when you're
Right.
doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned also, and I guess this would be a great time to clear that out when you say that sometimes people come in for the wrong
Yeah, I was just gonna
reasons.
ask that.
Yeah.
Can we elaborate a little bit? Because people, we don't know if they think that this is something for another
Right.
fix. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Right. So I would say right now, the thing that's all the trend,
Oh,
all the
no.
craze,
There it is. It's the trend. There it is.
is the lymphatic drainage to get you snatched, right?
Oh,
And I'm not opposed to it.
Right.
I think there's a group of therapists who are like the purists, like it's only the traditional and nothing else,
Okay.
And then there's the other therapists who are doing, some practices that we're like, what are you doing over there? And I've kind of looked at both,
Okay.
and I think there are things that we can pull
Mhm.
from the other side that
Right.
can be useful. So in terms of like the body contouring, the getting you snatched, getting you looking good, there is some truth to that because
Oh.
it can get rid of bloating. It can,
Oh, wow.
help you kind of rid yourself of some excess water weight.
Okay.
So some people who do these lymphatic drainage sessions
Right.
before, they go to these award shows or whatever, whatever it is, a special event.
Mm.
I've had people come because they're going to, get married and they want to, look as good as they can.
Right.
There is a little bit to it,
Okay.
but I would say again, there are also a lot of people out there who have kind of taken advantage of this.
Mm.
And if you've ever had lymphatic drainage done or if you've ever seen it, it looks very easy.
I've never had it done, actually.
No?
No. Have
No?
you? No.
Okay.
No.
Have you?
And
No.
people
Have you,
normally,
Michael?
kind of people.
Kind of?
Is it an analogy to
But it's also one of those things. I think people feel like they're going to feel 100% better the next
Right.
day, which is usually not exactly the
Right.
case because you're moving a lot of kind of either leftover static or even sometimes toxic stuff that needs to be
Yeah.
dumped. So like,
Right.
Yeah.
I've also known a lot of celebrities and people who have done it like the day before an award show, thinking I'm going to
Wow.
feel great and be
Right.
bright and shiny and clear, and they're like, "Whoa, what
Yeah.
happened?"
Now you just got to do Ozempic. I'm just kidding.
I didn't promote that.
Kidding, everybody. Kidding.
But yeah, there's definitely this effect where if, like I mentioned, if your lymphatic system has been kind of trucking along, barely holding on for a
Right.
while, but it's been backed up, it's been kind of sluggish for a while, and now somebody goes in and tries to clear it all out at once, you can have some of these side effects where, the next day or two, you might feel really lethargic and you
Oh,
might
wow.
get a headache. You might,
Oh, wow.
some people get nauseous. It's not common. I'll say
Mhm.
it's not very common, but it does
It
happen.
happens.
Yeah, and
And
don't be alarmed. I mean,
Yeah.
if
Right.
you're going to have things that have been building up in your system work their way out,
Mhm.
you got to think about like this is a waste product that hasn't been processed.
Right.
Right.
If we move it all around and it's been stuck somewhere, it's not going to feel great for any part of the body. And again, it's got to go through all those
Mhm.
TSA checkpoints
Right.
and be like, nope, this isn't supposed to be here. Nope,
Yeah.
don't go there. Go
Get
someplace
out the
else.
line.
Right?
Get out the line.
And then hit the exit.
Yes.
Well, look, what can we do at home to help with the lymphatic system?
Yeah. I mean,
Are there anything that we can do?
yes,
Okay.
because all this it sounds like you have to see a specialist and all
Right.
that. Our lymphatic system is going every day on its own without us thinking about it. It's moving, it's doing its thing. Basic movement, exercise gets the lymphatic system going.
Mhm.
And we might think, well, yeah, we exercise, but think about the people who can't. So think about the
Mhm.
people who are bedridden. Think about people who might be paralyzed somewhere.
Right.
When they don't have the ability to move maybe like they want to, you can see some of these things build up and you'll see, the effects of a backed up lymphatic system.
Okay.
So movement is great. Intentional movement is great.
Mm-hmm.
Just breathing is great.
Wow.
And again, intentional kind of deep diaphragmatic. If you do yoga, that
Okay.
the deep belly breaths
Yep.
is great.
That's awesome.
And kind of the mechanics behind that one is if you think back to the flower analogy, the stem of the flower, the duct that runs up and down our trunk,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of perforates our diaphragm. So our diaphragm sits right here, and that duct runs right through it. So when we do that deep breathing, the diaphragm is moving up and down, so it's kind of massaging that duct, but it's also acting kind of like a plunger.
Oh.
This is a great
okay.
analogy because going
There
back
you
to the
go. I
plumbing.
love you, Tina.
I know.
It's-
All of you will understand your analogy.
I was like thinking of the flower, like legit, like.
So it's good. It's actually acting like a plunger to kind of suck and suction all that fluid to get it moving again and flowing again. So the deep belly breaths are great, and it's something so simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
So exercise, breathing, diet,
Okay.
because we know,
Right.
when we look at inflammation, a
Mhm.
big part of what causes inflammation is diet,
That's true.
and sugar is a big
Mhm.
culprit. So
Right.
eat those cookies in moderation.
And external
Everything.
factors, all the chemicals
Yes.
that we
Yeah.
take on or that we have kind of attacking our body in a regular
Yeah.
Yep.
system, and all the different levels of smell, scents,
Mhm.
things we're cleaning our houses with, that kind of are in your system and are
Mhm.
around you, that you're absorbing all the little microplastics
Right.
of
Mhm.
Yeah.
the stuff that you use and drink. And an area that we don't talk a lot about is kids are becoming much more susceptible and having much bigger lymphatic problems.
Mhm.
And part of it is because we force them to stay still,
Right. No
and
movement.
then we
Mm.
teach them to do stationary things like video games and
Mhm.
cell phones and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And
And
then
their
their
diets
diet's
aren't
terrible.
great.
Yeah.
Because unless you're kind of
Right.
encouraging them or putting them in an environment where they have to eat, they're going to eat the most convenient, fastest, good tasting thing.
Mhm.
Right.
And so they're at a greater risk. And then the lymphatic system is it's a collection system. So over time,
Right.
the more you abuse it,
Right.
the worse it's going to get.
Right.
And so if you start young, you're going to pay for it at
Right.
some point.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely all those things, the external toxins that we
Right.
kind of take in. Also internally, stress can play a huge role.
And that's with
So
everything, right?
yeah, that's
Yes.
everything,
Man,
right?
stress is really
Stress
could be
is-
like the
stress is
number
That's why
one,
they call
like
it like the what is it? Silent
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 killer.
Yeah, the
pretty
It is a
much.
silent killer.
It's
Yeah.
a survival hormone that we have turned into our own kind of torture system,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Because
Absolutely.
the initial premise of it in your body is fight or flight, and
Right.
is to trigger a natural state for you to survive.
Right.
But now we have all these external stressors that we've designed kind of as our system that were never designed. So for our bodies, they were never designed to deal with stress all the time. Like if you were, some kind of primordial, primitive animal, like if you just think of an animal outside in nature, there's only so many times a day you're going to run into a predator.
Mhm.
And you're going to go somewhere at some point where you're going to
True.
feel safe and be kind of at home. But we are constantly stressing ourselves, whether it be work, family, financials, all of these things, right? And they don't have an off switch. So we're running from the predator all the time. And if you
Mhm.
can't find a way to regulate your body in that way, your body can't really differentiate between the physical threat and the emotional, psychological
Mhm.
threat. So you're just pumping those chemicals.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, essentially, we get stuck in that mode, which is the
Right.
sympathetic nervous system, right? So we kind of turn it on, which at times is good for us,
Mhm.
like you
Right.
said. But when we get stuck in the on mode all the time, that's when we get issues.
Right.
The nice thing is with lymphatic work, especially with the manual lymphatic drainage, it actually activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite, which is the rest and the digest system, which kind of turns off that fight or flight mode and helps us get back into the, okay, now we can relax, now we can get things flowing. And in relation to the stress, it's like with a sympathetic nervous system, when we're always stuck in this, like, I gotta go mode,
Right.
everything tenses, we don't breathe, our muscles don't move,
Yeah.
where everything's contracted,
Mm.
things can't flow. So we need to get into that relaxed state to help
Really
things
interesting.
flow.
It really
Well,
is.
it's like locking all the
Meditation,
doors,
man.
right?
Yeah, meditation.
Seriously.
It's like
Right.
having everything flowing inside you, but having all the doors locked and the valves start to close because they're trying to force a certain part of your body to be ready to move. And then the reality is you have to trigger the parasympathetic system,
Right.
right? To help.
Yeah.
It's like, it's okay. You can let go of some of that stuff. You can
Yeah.
open that door. You can kick the things out the valve. You
Right.
can let go.
Right.
And, it's at times anything in excess, going back to the flower analogy, it's almost like we do this thing with stress, which is stress is fine in small doses, right? But it's like either completely flooding your plant, that same
Mhm.
flower, or denying it all water,
Right.
right? And that's kind of what most people do is they go
Right.
from one extreme to the other. So you need to get the plunger going. You need to get that thing pumping. You need to find ways to kind of
Gosh.
get everything regulated, and we have to take moments. We've talked about it before. JD uses the morning. Dorothea goes to the beach. Like,
Yes.
we all have our ways, and you have to find some of those, and then
Mhm.
you have to be willing to look for things like, manual lymphatic, drainage
Uh-huh.
could be a really beneficial thing. You just have to know, and you have to find the right people.
Right, right. And then the last thing I'll add that you can kind of do at home, especially when we talk about these people who have the really strong effects after,
Mhm.
there's basic things that you can do for like self lymphatic drainage at home. And if
Okay.
the more you do these things, then when you do get an actual session, maybe you won't have such strong effects
Mhm.
after. So, kind of the handful of basic things and the sequence matters because again,
Okay.
we're thinking about opening up the
Right.
traffic jams. So number one, like I mentioned, the 2 points on your neck. And
Okay.
usually if you do it, with the opposite hand, it's a little easier. So
Okay.
you can just start right above the collarbone. You can do some circles, the
Okay.
traditional waterway
Mhm.
is circles in towards your heart. You look at like Chinese medicine, they do like tapping, you can
Right.
do just kind of pumping. I'm not that particular. Basically, what you're doing is creating a pressure gradient, right?
Okay.
So you want to just kind of create pressure gradients, both sides,
Mhm.
5 to 10 times. That's all it takes.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay, that's number one.
Uh-huh.
2, do that deep breathing to
Mhm.
get that diaphragm going, get that big pipe kind of cleared and
Right.
moving. 3, the armpits, right? So just
Mhm.
give a good rub. Again, rub, tap, I don't care.
Okay.
Under your armpits, 5 to 10 times each side. If
Okay.
you want to really get it, I like to do kind of right on the arm as well and
Right.
underneath. So kind of all 3 sections, getting the
Okay.
whole armpit area.
And that's every morning, every
Yeah.
night, whatever,
Yeah.
just every
If
day.
you can do it once a day,
Wow.
Okay.
That's
once a day even better.
I
And then
didn't
last
know.
one is the
Okay.
groin. So your
Mhm.
inguinal nodes here. So these are basically all the areas where you have a lot of lymph nodes.
Okay.
Right? So the groin right along your entire leg crease. So if
Mhm.
you have smaller hands like me, it might take a
Uh-huh.
few placements, but same thing. I'm just kind of pumping all along the area where your leg bends and creases
Right.
and kind of stimulating these lymph nodes.
Okay.
And that just kind of gives a nice little boost to your lymphatic system.
Okay.
There are, of course, other areas that we would target, but one thing to mention is that there are some contraindications to
Mhm.
lymphatic drainage. So, there are some things where we wouldn't want to do lymphatic drainage on
Right.
someone or certain areas we might want to avoid. But those I feel like are pretty safe, areas to start. If you have serious medical history, then of
Mhm.
course, check with your doctor first. But, I think for
Okay.
general, just kind of well-being, self-care, it's a good little boost.
So this is a two-part before we, wrap everything up. One, how does one find a properly trained therapist? And two, how can people contact you?
Yes. So we were talking about this. It gets a little tricky. But most lymphatic therapists, it's extra credentialing, it's extra training certification on top of usually it's going to be an occupational therapist like myself,
Mhm.
a physical therapist, could be a massage therapist, an RN. So they'll start with their basic credentials. And then on top of that, at a minimum, the gold standard would be someone with the CLT credential, which is a certified lymphedema therapist. Okay, there's like maybe 3 or 4, that's it, schools within the US who do this on top of their regular licensing.
Right.
So CLT would be kind of a good starting point. Beyond that, there's the LANA Association, so the Lymphology Association of North America, LANA, LANA. That means that the therapist has gone above and beyond, kind of done some extra studying, passed a really hard
Hard test.
You might know
which-
somebody there. Might know somebody who went the extra mile.
Okay.
which kind of can just give you the peace of mind that at least they know the anatomy, the physiology,
Right.
all that stuff that you want them to know. That it can get tricky to find someone in your area. So at a bare minimum, I would say you want someone who has at least the MLD-C credential, and they can get that from the same schools. And I can give you the schools if you want to put it in the show notes or something.
Okay.
That do the certification. So, we always try to get the word out there. If you're going to go to a lymphatic therapist, make sure they're certified. They're certified, right?
Right.
And then what I started
That's
seeing
important. Yeah.
is, people take these weekend courses and they get this
Oh, no.
printed certification and they're like, I'm
Social
certified.
media courses.
I'm
Right.
certified, right? I
Right.
have a certificate. I'm certified.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you want to make sure that they have those actual letters, those credentials after their names. And there are directories that those schools have of their graduates. You can also go to the LANA website. And again, it kind of depends why you're looking for it. If it's just kind of wellness, there are a lot of massage therapists who do, lymphatic massage, and it might not necessarily be a bad thing. Any massage is generally good. It helps with
Right.
blood circulation. It
Yeah.
helps with a lot of things.
Mhm.
So that might be enough for you. But if you are actually targeting something for a specific health condition or a health reason,
Mhm.
then I would say try to find someone who is, actually properly certified.
And then what about you?
So I have my private practice. I am mobile throughout Orange County. So
Okay.
I'm at OC Lymphatics, so oclymphatics.com, on Instagram at OC Lymphatics. I'm not on the TikTok. I've held out. And then also for those in the LA area who have actual medical conditions,
Mhm.
I would need a doctor's referral for this, but I'm
Okay.
at the Keck Medical Center of USC.
Okay.
So in Los Angeles, there's the Keck Hospital, and I do actual, medical treatments there.
Okay. So it's oclymphatics.com
Yes,
that they can reach you. And does insurance pay for that?
not the private work down here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
In LA, yes.
Okay. Well, Tina, we love you. And I know that the viewers and the listeners will take this information, whether it's for themselves or for loved ones or just anyone that they know that could, benefit from this. We do appreciate you coming by and
This was
enlightening
a lot of
us
fun.
and teaching us
It was a
about
little
this.
nerve-wracking,
I learned a lot.
but it was fun.
You
It
did
was
fantastic.
I learned a lot, actually. I learned a lot more than I.
No, and I would tell people all those areas you told people to massage.
Right.
If you have a lot of sensitivity or if you have any kind of bump or
Mhm.
swelling in that area,
Yes.
and one of the areas people don't realize is a lot of people have bumps underneath their arms
Mhm.
and they don't notice or they just put their deodorant on over it. There's a very good chance something's building up there. And it could even be your deodorant, right?
Yeah.
And so if you have bumps in any of those areas, it's time to kind of evaluate. It'd be a good idea to go get checked and then potentially
Call
find
Tina.
someone
Yeah.
Call Tina.
like
Yeah,
Tina to
Better call Tina.
help you. And if you're in the LA Orange County area, absolutely call Tina.
Yeah, one more quick thing just for safety, because I'm glad you mentioned that. 'Cause
Right,
there
right.
are some things that can cause swelling that it's
Mhm.
not just a matter of getting lymphatic drainage. If you
Okay.
have an actual blockage, if there's a tumor anywhere, if you have a blood clot that is blocking your system
Ooh.
and causing swelling, you need to get that checked. So if you, as you're doing these self things, if you do
Mhm.
notice something that pops up like that suddenly out of nowhere, go to your doctor, get it checked out first, because that's something that needs to be medically addressed first. So
Okay.
thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I mean it's important. I think people don't know what they're looking for, right? And the knowledge is power. I mean, it's one of the reasons that we started this process.
Yeah.
And you gave us such beautiful ways to kind of self-stimulate and kind of feed your own body in a sense. But it's important that you take notice of what's going on, because if it's sore, if it starts swelling, if you find a nodule, a little
Right.
thing, this means it's time to go find out if there's something bigger going on to
Mhm.
protect yourself.
Yes. Yes.
Well, Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the wisdom.
And I
Thank you.
will
I
do
really
those at
appreciate
home
it.
today.
Me
Every
too. I
day.
mean, now that I know,
I am.
this is so
For
simple.
sure, I am. And then if I need to actually comment, I'll call you.
Yeah, we know who
Me
to
too.
call.
I will call you.
All right.
Thanks,
thank you.
Tina. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in again. And we will see you the next time. Bye.